Hi, I'm Carl Taylor and welcome to this week's photo breakdown, where we're going to take a look at this image of this mysterious model in this lovely lighting, and we're going to find out exactly why controlling shadow density is as important as controlling light. Now, the image that we have here, I actually shot this live on a workshop that I ran in Taiwan, in Taipei. It was a wonderful workshop, met some really nice people and photographers, and it was a joint workshop, I think, with Hasselblad and broncolor. So I was demonstrating lighting techniques and principles of light, etc. And we did this shot with the lovely model. Unfortunately, I can't remember her name. But I just wanted to show how careful control of light was important, but also how important it was to think about shadows. Because photographers often become obsessed with putting light on stuff, throwing light everywhere, and they never really consider how important shadows are to that process and how we can control the shadows. And this is a really good example, because if we take a closer look at this image, we obviously have some interesting light going on. I've put a sort of patch of light on the face, lovely catches of light on the lips and the eyes, down the edge of the hair, down the edge of the jawline and the neck, etc. But essentially the front of the body has been kept subdued in terms of exposure. It's intentionally been left as shadows so that the lighting hitting the face stands out more. So to do that, we obviously have to think about shadow density and exposure. And this is one of those things that always comes up in my argument about whether to use a light meter or not to use a light meter. I don't use a light meter. If you want to use a light meter, that's fine. I don't need to use a light meter because I'm looking at the image and I'm deciding how I want it to look. I'm not relying on measurements, because obviously you can take a measurement, but the reflective surfaces and skin may well be different. I saw another comment recently where someone said, oh, you have to have a light meter to know exactly how to reproduce the lighting next time. What a load of nonsense. I can take a measurement off of my raw file in the tethered software, and then I could take that same measurement on the next shot. So I actually have a more accurate light meter, because the measurements by doing it in the software is down to 1/30th of an f-stop instead of 1/10th of an f-stop. So that argument goes out the window. Anyway, by the by, if you want to use a light meter, that's absolutely fine. I used one for 15 years in my career when I was shooting film, but as soon as film disappeared and I went digital, there was no need for one anymore, because you can do it all in the software. And additional to that, I find that by actually looking at the image and making the decisions visually, I'm able to create better images. But anyway, I digress. Let's move on. So if we look at that, controlling the exposure in the shadows was very important for this shot to emulate the effect of the lighting, because essentially we have rim lighting around our model, as I pointed out, down the side of the neck, down the side of the arms here, either side, and down the side of the face there, and then obviously a slightly brighter exposure on the face. Now, to do this rim lighting is very gentle around the shoulders and the neck, and that's deliberate because I want the face lighting to stand out a little bit more. I don't want us to be drawn away to the rim lighting around the body in this particular case. So to do that, where the exposure on the face becomes about the right exposure and the rim lighting around the body slightly less exposure, then of course the front lighting on the body can't be that bright, because otherwise the rim lighting around the side of the model won't show up. So it's just all about the balance. You can call it ratios, can call it whatever you like. I just look at it visually and I assess the mood and the feel that I want to create. So how was it done and what was important? Let's take a closer look. So if we move over to the lighting diagram and I just bring in, here's our camera, and then there is our background. Our background in this case was just a grey, mid to dark grey background. Then we have our model, and then here is a standard studio light with a P70 reflector, 70-degree reflector on, and that is casting a glow of light on the wall, which is creating that sort of soft, gradual glow that you can see there behind the model emanating around her body. Now you can control that glow by simply moving the light further or closer, and then obviously controlling the intensity. And you can also soften the glow by just putting a little bit of diffusion material on the front of the light. We cover all of the technicalities of really high-end lighting on carltailoreducation.com. Now, further to that, the rim lighting around the model was created with a softbox on the left and a softbox on the right. And those softboxes are tall, thin softboxes to match the shape of the model. A tall, thin body that I want to put light all the way down the side, so it makes sense to light it with a softbox that reaches the same area. We could have, of course, used a standard lamp head with a 70-degree reflector on, but we would have had a brighter area around the shoulders, and it would have been a higher contrast light and more difficult to control, and it wouldn't have been as even all the way down the body. By using an homogeneous softbox, large vertical one, then I can get that rim lighting fairly even down throughout the body, as you can see down the neckline and the shoulder line, and also catching the jaw. So that was created with the two soft boxes that you can see there. Then from the front, and this was an important light, I had a Para 133 away from the model, overhead, a couple of meters away, shining directly at the model. But the important thing about this light, it didn't even need to be a Para 133. It could have been a silver umbrella, could have even been a softbox, could have been a beauty dish, because this light really wasn't doing a great deal. It was acting as a shadow fill, but a controlled shadow fill that wasn't going to throw light all around the studio and fill light into the shadows of my background. So it was controlled and focused towards the model, and it was just to give a little bit of light there into the collarbone, chest area and the dress, so that those shadows aren't completely dark. And that level of lighting that we introduced there, you can't really measure it with a light meter, because a light meter would tell you it needs to be X amount of exposure. And in this instance, I need it completely underexposed. And a lot of people argue, well, like a light meter will get me in the ballpark. Yes, it will. But if you just put the light on mid power, you know, that's halfway between its weakest and its brightest power, and you take a shot with it on mid power, you then know, is it correct or is it too dark or too light? And if it's on mid, then you know you've got to either turn the volume up or turn the volume down to get where you want. And you can usually get there within 1 or 2 test shots once you get your eye in. So I can just control that light really delicately by visually looking at the image and assessing whether or not I get to the right mood or the right feeling. And it may be that when I introduce the rim lighting on top of that, or etc., that I might then want to adjust it a little bit further. So I'm never setting my decisions in stone. I'm always assessing the visual representation that it's giving me. So that particular light is creating just that very gentle fill into the shadows, so that they essentially remain as shadows and don't overpower the scene. Further to that, our next item is a silver reflector that you can see here, and that silver reflector is just to bounce a little bit more light up from underneath, because down here in the lower part of the dress, the light fall off from that gentle fill light at the top is not reaching as strongly down here, so that silver reflector is bouncing a little bit of light just gently back up into the dress area. Then moving on from that, the very key part of this particular setup was this light here. And this was a very specialized light called a projection attachment modifier. And what that does is it uses a lens that you can then focus the light, and you can project a very tight beam of light. You can basically create patches of light just a millimeter thick if you want, by a millimeter wide, or you can create small thin lines of light, triangles, squares of light, and it's done with these gobo mask blades that go into the projection attachment, and I use that a lot for product photography, and we cover the usage of those on Carl Tailor Education. In fact, we also show how you can do it with budget level equipment such as the Godox projection attachment. And again, in one of our previous live shows, we created a fantastic image with a model live on air using the gobo lights and their projection attachment. Anyway, so we used the projection attachment here. This was the broncolor Pico light one, and that created that beam of light very specifically onto that area of the face. Now, if you look at that light on the edge of the face, you'll notice that it is not pin sharp. It doesn't create a hard shadow. And one of the beauties with the projection attachment is that you can focus the lens on the projection attachment, and it changes the sharpness of the blades or the image being projected. So you can actually defocus that, and that allows me to soften the shadow edges so it sort of more blends in more easily. This is also a very useful tool in product photography, photographing labels on bottles and products. And again, on Carl Taylor Education, you'll see the science behind that and how I light my subjects using these tools. Now, if we look at the giveaway and the catch light in the eyes, you can actually see the light from the projection attachment there, and you can see how bright it is. So you can understand that that light is actually putting out the most exposure. And then if you look at the light from the Para 133, you can see it's very weak indeed. That is just that gentle fill light to create that little bit of light in the shadows. This light caught on the side of the eye over on the right here is actually the same light that is the light down the side of the body, and that of course is the light coming from this softbox over on this side, and that's catching the edge of the eye of the model. Obviously the light down the hair, the back of the head, the ear, down the neck, and also catching the jawline, fortunately, because of the angle of her face, is all coming from that left-hand softbox. So that was the setup for that particular shot, and I hope from that you understand how important it is to control the light in shadows. Now, one of the other really interesting things we teach about lighting on carltayloreducation.com is not only controlling the light in the shadows, but also controlling the color of the light in the shadows and why that is important. You can find out more on Carl Taylor Education. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks very much for watching.